Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbar. Joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Jeanette McNeely. We warmly welcome the family of Company Sergeant Major Samuel Wormwell, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. I now invite you all to stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this National Museum and Memorial came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway lands. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Company Sergeant Major Samuel Wormwell. Known to friends and family as Sam, Samuel Wormwell was born in about 1876 in Earby in Yorkshire, England, into the large family of James and Hannah Wormwell. He attended Old Grammar School, Earby, before going on to start a career as a mason. At the turn of the century, Samuel Wormwell enlisted for service in the Boer War, attaining the rank of corporal in the Imperial Yeomanry. He served with Brabant's Horse, a light horse regiment that saw much action against the Boer commandos and with the Johannesburg Mounted Rifles. Returning from South Africa, Wormwell married Ada Aldersley on the 4th of March 1903. A son, Arthur William, was born that year, and 3 years later, another son, Fred, was born to the couple. In 1910, Samuel Wormwell left his wife and children, aged 7 and 4, in Yorkshire and travelled to Australia. After a few months in Australia, Wormwell invited Mary Emma Thornton, who he had known from his hometown of Earby, to join him in Australia. Emma was also married, but her husband, a solicitor named Thornton, had a reputation as an abusive and unfaithful man. She had sought assistance from Wormwell whilst he was in Yorkshire on at least one occasion, and endured a great deal of abuse for the sake of her children. When her husband began a liaison with her own sister, she fled to Australia and joined Wormwell. Emma joined Samuel in Adelaide before travelling to Murray Bridge, where they lived together as husband and wife in ideal happiness. Samuel's brother Jesse followed him to Australia in 1912, also leaving his wife and daughters behind in Yorkshire, and the brothers established a building business in Murray Bridge. A third Wormwell brother came to Australia about the same time, leaving his wife and children behind and settling near Redmark. When war broke out, Jesse Wormwell was the first brother to enlist, doing so in September 1914. After joining the 10th Battalion, he was among the first group to land at Anzac Cove in the early hours of the 25th of April 1915. He served throughout the war, returning to Australia in January 1919. Samuel Wormwell enlisted at Keswick in mid-February 1915 and left Adelaide with the rank of corporal on the troop ship Geelong, bound for Egypt. He joined the 27th Battalion on Gallipoli in September. The battalion had a relatively quiet time there and departed the peninsula in December, having suffered only light casualties. Because of his service in Africa and Australia's shortage of experienced officers, Wormwell rose through the ranks fairly quickly. He was promoted to Company Sergeant Major in early December 1915 and took up battlefield promotion as Warrant Officer Class 2 on the 1st of March 1916. The 27th Battalion entered the frontline trenches for the first time shortly after in early April and took part in its first major battle at Pozières the following July. In early August, the battalion was responsible for capturing the Windmill, a heavily fortified German position on the outskirts of Pozières that had remained out of reach for weeks. The battalion suffered more than 400 casualties during its time at Pozières and Mouquet Farm. After being relieved and spending some time in a quieter sector of the front of Belgium, the battalion returned to the Somme. The battlefield had by this time been subjected to heavy rain, and the trenches had become a quagmire. In November, the battalion participated in 2 operations to capture German positions near the French village of Fleur. Each of these operations managed to capture some of their objectives, but each time the battalion was forced to withdraw. During the first of these attacks, on the 5th of November, Samuel Wormwell was hit in the head by a bullet. He left the front line for treatment, but was not wounded badly and was able to return to the front. As he was returning to Limes, he was killed outright by a shell. His body was not recovered until the following March, when he was finally buried. He was 40 years old. His gravesite later became lost, and today Samuel Wormwell is commemorated at the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux. His name also appears on war memorials in his hometown of Earby and in Kelbrook in Yorkshire. He is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Company Sergeant Major Samuel Wormwell, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand and remove hats for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.